Hello everybody. I thought I would start this first video response off with one of my very favorites paintings by Gustav Courbet, and I'm sure you will all recognize it. It is The Desperate Man, sometimes known as The Desperate Man 2. There is another one in there, um, but usually this is kind of considered the more famous one. There you go. I'm sure you all recognize this. It's extremely famous and for good reason. So just start this all off here just with the rule of thirds. You can see how he sets this up, which is actually almost kind of ignoring what we would consider the rule of thirds. A lot of his emphasis points there, the corresponding lines, they don't really match up. Everything's very centered, and as I talk about this a little bit more and get into the lines and the aspects of that, I think it will make a little bit more sense how he very masterfully, took the rule of thirds and kind of threw it out the window and still managed a very successful painting. Okay, so we're back here to the original, and you can see where he's at here. This man with his very penetrating gaze, and for the longest time I really felt like it was his eyes and it was his face and his expression that really drew me in. And since then I've broken it down and looked at it in the lines and tried to put this in a historical context, which is just really fascinating, and to say the least. So what you have here is all these directional lines that essentially are framing his face, and they're only really just his eyebrow lines, his nose, the opening of his mouth, as your quieter, more calm, which is quite a stark contrast to the expression on his face. But as far as lines go, everything is framed by the tension of these diagonal lines through his hands, his arms, even his fingers. In the background, you see the two tones of the dark earthen green and more of the tan, almost a skin tone. And the background is even in a diagonal, creating so much tension and literally surrounding his face. And I think this is really what leads to the success of how he just threw the rule of thirds out the window, and as I mentioned earlier, and went in and essentially just said, look, this is it. Here's the swirling storm, and here I am at my wit's end. This is all I have left, and at this point we kind of get into a little bit more of in a historical context. Right, so The Desperate Man is painted in around the 1843 to 1845, which is the tail end of what you would consider his romantic period, or I guess romantic stylings. Everything else from this point on, basically at 1848, which is the French Revolution of 1848, and not the one with cake, and not the one with Napoleon, but Napoleon's nephew, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte III, yeah. And it's more about the right to work, how the common man is dealing with this revolutionary type kind of setting. So if you put that in its historical context, that Courbet is basically sowing the seeds for his realism, the 19th century French realism, which he pretty much spearheads, I guess, in a way, or at least he's the most, or with the most notoriety of that group. And he spends a lifetime thumbing his nose at elitists and doing it all through the work of his paintings. But this one, The Desperate Man, I think was his. This is not. Probably shouldn't go this far with it, but I think this is his initial step off into that realism. And I'm bourgeois and I'm a working class type kind of guy, and so screw you. But he had a lifetime of very controversial paintings, and even later on, this is before The Origin of the World. I'm not going to put a picture of that one up there. If you don't know that one, you can Google it yourself. But I think that The Origin of the World, taken out of context of what was happening, really kind of paints him as a little bit of a chauvinist. But if you take this and show the weakness that this shows here, the humanity and the vulnerability of man, as opposed to necessarily, just a chauvinist that's painting a woman's vagina in full display, and what a lot of people now might consider porn or pornography. I really think that this is what everyone should turn around and put and say, no, this is very much a man speaking in broader terms. And I'm veering over into opinions at this point and less about the breakdown of really the only thing that I had left on that is talking about the use of color and how dramatic the value scale is in this. And it really kind of harkens back to some of those great masterwork paintings, and Raphael and some of those guys that really did some amazing dramatic pieces, which set the tone for the whole work. So yeah, thank you, and next time I will get rid of some of those ums and ahs and pauses and shrink this back down into the 5 minutes, and it might be a little bit more succinct. And sorry if you had to hear my cat running around like a crazy little demon that it is right now. So thanks.